The Steel type is one of the most powerful across the Pokemon series. Unsurprisingly, this is thanks to being so defensive, holding the largest number of resistances, highest average defense, plus an extra immunity on top of it all. And that's not to say they're lacking in the strength department, since Steel boasts plenty of powerful moves backed up by some absurd Pokemon, which brings up the question of how difficult it should be to find these monsters in-game. That's why today, we will take on the final added type missing in our challenges and see just how fast you can find a Steel type in every Pokemon game. Like our other two challenges on post-Gen 1 types, we will still cover games without Steel types if there are targets which gain it later. Thankfully, the original and only gen without Steel has one updated line with Magnemite and Magneton. Now, the base games feature only one location we can catch these magnets at, the power plant, which is locked until we can get Surf. However, Yellow adds to this with encounters just north on Route 10, so we will go ahead and pick up both, with Red simply following the classic speedrun route until we get the Pokeflute, at which point we head straight for Koga to get Surf access. After grabbing the aforementioned HM in the Safari Zone, we dig back to Cerulean and head for the power plant, eyeing our Steel type and making the first catch without too much trouble. Yellow is of course a bit faster though, as after leaving Bill's, we go straight for the SS Anne to take down our rival and grab Cut. Then we head back to take down Misty so we can use the HM, but this order makes the battle a tad easier thanks to the extra EXP and saves a few steps overall. Afterwards we head right through Route 10, this time getting to stop and find Magnemite in its first outdoor encounter, getting us our second catch already. But things get a bit more interesting in the region that introduced the type. Funnily, that isn't thanks to the Steel encounters available to us, as Johto hardly puts the shiny new type at the forefront, containing only 4 new Pokemon, 2 of which require being traded with the Metal Coat, an item that is only even obtained in the post-game or held by Magnemite. Speaking of which, they appear as early as Route 38, which beats out the only other catchable option in Skarmory, only found after reaching Blackthorn for Route 45. And that leaves the last option, Fortress. While we can only catch its non-Steel pre-evolution Pineco, that can be caught as soon as we get Headbutt in Elix Forest via tree encounters. Luckily, the catch itself isn't a worry, as despite trees having different encounter chances that are tied to an ID-based calculation, tools online like T-Shadows show which are which, and Pineco is a 30% encounter in all tables anyways. Now, the base games feature Pineco and Elix's higher encounter trees, so we will stick to those for this challenge, especially since every encounter accessible in all 3 games will be level 10, which brings us to the big question, can we evolve before hitting enough Magnemites to make a ton? Well, the level 2 evolve isn't the worst at 31, but we only have 11 minutes before the world record would reach Ecruteak for Magnemite access. In fact, our lead will only even be at 22 by that point, which would require even more EXP from Pineco's leveling group. Even if we ignore the lack of leveling options though, any chance Pineco had is about to explode, as its moveset is atrocious. Just tackle and self-destruct until 15, where it gains another self-damaging non-stab move in Takedown. And let's just say we could somehow bike fast enough to use the Daycare for EXP, we would still need to get the final level on our own since Pokemon can't evolve there. And without any obtainable rare candies until past Magnemite access anyways, there is no competition here. One last thing worth mentioning though, Gold and Silver's code actually feature a set of encounter tables for Headbutt trees in cities, containing 30% Magnemite encounters, but are unused in-game and removed in Crystal. So in the end, Pineco is a no-go, and we are left with what is at this point basically a Magneton as we catch our 3rd Magnemite of the challenge. Okay, really quick, no ad this time, just a self-promo that I've launched a Patreon where I'll be posting behind-the-scenes kind of video podcasts corresponding to each new upload on the channel for supporters. These will be unscripted and just a way for me to share more about my work, research, and general adventures associated with each project for those that might be interested or simply want to support the channel further. I also plan on posting extra sneak peeks for upcoming projects and other bonus content that I wouldn't get to include on the main channel. The base tier is $5 and gets you access to any of the bonus videos and update content, with the higher tiers really just existing if you want a way to support further. Excited to share this and have things started over there. I really appreciate any support. And now let's get back to the Steel types. Getting it over with first, the Hoenn region once again features Magnemite, but not until we can surf to reach New Mauville. Unsurprisingly, the region featuring a Steel Specialist champion does in fact contain some alternatives for us. Thankfully, 2 of these can be found relatively early in Granite Cave, where we first meet the champion, those being Aron and Mawile. Neither can be encountered until we go down at least 1 floor though, at which point Aron has a 40% encounter in all games, while Mawile has a 10% encounter but only in Ruby. Additionally, the next floor down doubles the Mawile rate. Since the base games only have a bit to gain by this point anyways, we can simply stick with Ruby and make our way to Granite Cave, where we can head towards floor B2. Although even if we do hit a Mawile first, its catch rate is 1/3 Aron's, so it might not always pay off. Regardless, we finally get to catch a Steel type that isn't Magnemite. But an aspect many have asked about are particular event Pokemon, and this one I am inclined to discuss, as the Colosseum bonus disc can be used to send a Jirachi to any Ruby or Sapphire that hasn't already received the gift as soon as you get the Pokedex. This differs from many other distributions that were timed or later linked to single-use codes. Regardless, the disc really only seems suitable if you have it, as ordering the rare product and waiting for the delivery will always take longer than simply heading to Granite Cave and finding some Mons. But if you do have it, enjoy Jirachi as your earliest Steel type. Okay, I know you're probably worried that Magnemite is going to return given Generation 4 introduces a brand new evolution in Magnezone. However, the earliest we can encounter them in all games is at the surf-required Fuego Ironworks, and only through post-game swarms in Diamond and Pearl. Instead, we get to stick with the newly introduced Steel types, and although a diverse group, the earliest encounterable is likely unsurprising, as Bronzor can be found both east and south of Eterna. The latter is for the base games and would require us to finish up the gym and galactic events, but heading east to Route 211 for Platinum's added 10% encounter requires no additional progression, and is on the way to Mount Cornet where we up our odds to 20%. However, there are still some other options to address. First, a starter Piplup can technically become a Steel type before this point in the game, but similar to our Gen 2 debacle, there is no feasible way to reach level 36 within the first 50 minutes. Yet even more like the Fortress situation, Honey Trees technically offer our last option, as Burmy could evolve into a Steel type Wormadam at just level 20 if it's in its Trash Cloak. These forms are changed based on where Burmy last battled, and the Trash Cloak simply requires it to be indoors, which could be done via upcoming galactic battles. However, like previous challenges, Honey Tree encounters are simply out of the question given they require 6 real-time hours to pass, and this is on top of the fact that we would need to hit an extra 50-50 since Burmy only evolves into Wormadam if female. Thus, these other options simply end up far slower than what we can catch outside Eterna, ending up with a shiny new floating Steel object in Bronzor. And to further keep us from getting any unneeded Magnemites, the remakes don't leave much to cover since the Kanto games result in the same power plant Magnemite with any added Steel types stuck in the post-game. Meanwhile, the Johto remakes do shake up some of the tree mechanics, but not in a way that is helpful for us, with the same encounter table odds and only at levels equal to or lower than what we had before, leaving things unchanged with Magnemite. Similarly, the only update for Ruby and Sapphire is that Aron now sits at 30%, while Mawile is only found on the lowest floor. And although we won't be discussing any external methods for obtaining Jirachi and Hoenn, the last remakes on our list actually do have something in this department, as there is an in-game gift Jirachi as soon as you reach Floroma Town. The only requirement is to have sword or shield data on your system. Although this is similar to the bonus disc, it is currently far more feasible and a game required for finishing our challenge. So we will skip out on a second Bronzor by instead grabbing the gift Jirachi and wrapping up the remakes. Featuring an entirely new regional dex, Black and White gives us its own Steel sorrows, as we can't find any Steel encounters until Chargestone Cave, which the Manipulus World Record can't access until an hour and 43 minutes in. However, there is one more option available to us, being the all-powerful Excadrill, thanks to Drillbur in Wellspring Cave around 35 minutes in. Now, its max level here is 13, and just like Pineco, it doesn't evolve until 31, meaning we would need to do some work to get it there. But the Unova region gives us an ever-accessible grinding tool in Audido, which makes almost all grass patches in the game reasonable grinding spots. Plus, there's no barrier between where we catch our soon-to-be Steel type and a solid 95% for Audino outside Pinwheel Forest. Given their level range of 12 to 15, along with the max being a quarter of all encounters, we should be set. The only real issues here are experience gain now factoring in levels, and the solid 29k experience we would need. Luckily, the single rare candy used in the speedrun happens to be picked up on our way to the grind, saving about 3k experience. And even on our final level, Audino still provide a solid 340 to 553 experience per battle. Lastly, our location isn't just the best spot for Audino, but also has a nurse who can quickly heal us at any point. Thus, after catching our mole, grabbing a candy, and heading over to the grinding spot, we start hunting Audino, eventually taking the nurse down when required for quick heals, and continue a fairly lengthy grind. Yet even on my first attempt, still ended up definitively faster than the only other steal options by around 4 minutes, leaving us with our overpowered champion, Excadrill. But that's not the last we will see of this mon, because in the sequels, speedruns do in fact utilize Excadrill and get the evolution before Chargestone Cave anyways, which is still the earliest location to catch any Unovan Steel types. Meaning, we need to see if there are any earlier options, and unsurprisingly, the addition of prior gen Pokemon provides some. In particular, Riolu can be found right at the start in Focusy Ranch, and while this brings up the question of friendship evolution speeds, we luckily don't need to worry about it, as only 17 minutes later, we can reach Verbank Complex, which features the multi-run champion, Magnemite, letting us wrap up our adventures in Unova without any friendship worries, while crowning the Little Magnet its third regional win of the challenge. Upon reaching the Kalos games, we get just 4 new steel types, with the Honedge line and Klefki, the lowest number added post the type's introduction. And while the keys are significantly later in the game, Honedge, the winner of our Ghost Challenge, can be caught quite early on Route 6 at a 15% rate. Now this region does have prior gen Pokemon all throughout, and while there are no earlier steel type catches, there are again some options we need to check. First of which, Route 3 contains Burmy, this time without any tree related considerations, meaning a trash cloaked Wormadam is possible. But while this encounter is almost 20 minutes earlier and there are indoor battles to again trigger the trash cloak, Burmy is only a 10% find, and since we need a female for Wormadam, that's an average of 20 encounters before expecting to find it. Plus, Burmy starts at just level 5, and similar to the Pineco problem, doesn't get anything too useful until 15. And without something like Audino to grind until Honedge can be found, Wormadam will again fall short, which leaves one final option, as Riolu also returns around the corner on Route 22, making Lucario a possibility. Now like last time, friendship really wouldn't seem feasible with just 20 minutes to work with, a base amount of 70 friendship, and an evolution requirement of 220. But my curiosity was piqued when I saw one new friendship gaining mechanic, Super Training, as it gives plus 20 friendship without any threshold limitations. I wasn't even sure if the feature was accessible at the start of the game, but was happily surprised to learn that it's available as soon as we get our starter. However, there's some setup here. First, each 20-point boost requires us to use and break a soothing training bag. Although I can't find specific odds or times for obtaining these, there are 26 different bags that can be dropped by hanging out on the training screen, and it seems likely that we wouldn't have better than a 1 out of 26 shot at the soothing bag. Beyond this, while the 25 other bags require 10 to 100 hits to break, the soothing bag requires 250, which takes 2 minutes each to break anyways, meaning even with infinite bags, a friendship route wouldn't be viable here. Finally leaving us back on Route 6 with our fittingly first double type run winner, Honedge. The Alola region doesn't really help the Steel type out in terms of new mons either, since there's only one new non-legendary or Ultra Beast Pokemon, Togedemaru, which can't be encountered until the 3rd island. However, regional forms will help us out, as 2 are luckily Steel, with Diglett and Sandshrew. And while the latter is on the same island as Togedemaru, Diglett can be found as soon as we finish the first trial, being a wild encounter in Verdant Cavern. Now we have to finish the first trial since the cavern's wild encounters aren't on until this point. And although the Ultra games have a 5% higher encounter rate, they will be behind by just a bit. However, there is one other Steel type featured on the first island from previous gens, and it's none other than Magnemite at the Trainer School, easily beating the Diglett option. Here we will stick to the base game since the Ultras reduce Magnemite's rate by 40% and offer no earlier option, leaving us with our 5th magnet of the challenge. and it seems like it might not be the last, with the Let's Go games taking us back to Kanto. However, as we have mentioned before, these games do in fact include trades for the Alolan variants, and Diglett's in Lavender Town is still before Sandshrew, who is over in Celadon. Luckily, we can't surf to reach Magnemite at the power plant until after passing both trades. Still, there is one new Pokemon, and it is of course Steel, being Meltan. But even if we want to allow the transfer required from Go to get it, we would need to reach the Go Park and Fuchsia to do so. Thus, we simply grab a Diglett while in Vermilion and make a trade soon after, meaning the refined little Diglett actually will come out on top this time around. Being the games titled with Steel in mind, Sword and Shield bring a number of non-legend options with the regional Meowth line, Cufant line, Corviknight, and Duraludon. All will be uncatchable in the wild at the start due to level limits in place without badges except for Meowth, specifically found on Route 4, which is one route past when we could catch a Clink anyways. Now while Clink and Bronzor can actually be found in the wild area within our level limit, each requires a weather condition that won't appear until later in the game, but the wild area isn't out just yet because of raid dens. Of those that can be active at the start, none are dedicated to steel types. However, there are still a few options. In particular, Dapplegrove's pair of grass dens have Ferroseed, and the Watchtower Ruins contain Honedge. The problem is that all three are only in the rare pool, a 12.5% chance per den, and then only a 10% counter for Ferroseeds and a 35% for Honedge. Plus, we still would need to hit at least one of these among the 8 of 24 active at the start. So unless we see these active with a rare raid, we need to find another option. Which lets me correct a mistake from the Ditto video, as we can use a Wishing Piece at any den without meeting the activation prerequisites. And from these, there are actually 3 steel-themed dens, with the closest 2 being in the Giant Seat. We need to stick to the slightly further den here, as all possible encounters are steel, whereas the other has a 35% shot for who else but Riolu in the rare pool. And as foolproof as this seems, we still have to discuss some final options. First, the Isle of Armor of course provides more steel types, one of which right at the start is Klefki. But we already learned this is just a few minutes slower in the Dragon video, mostly due to the necessary DLC rival fight. Now, the Crown Tundra can also be explored earlier, but the wild options are above our level cap, and Dynamax Adventures can't guarantee a specific target. However, this area is notable for being used in Get Urshifu speedruns thanks to its EXP candies, one of which, next to the mayor's house, is an XL providing 30,000 experience. And the reason this matters for us is because it's the only way a Rookidee to Corviknight route could be possible. For this evolution, Galar's regional bird will need to make it all the way to level 38. And while Rookidee is in the medium-slow leveling group, that is the second fastest to reach 38, needing 47,846 experience. The highest level we will be able to catch is at 7, but this only shaves off 236 total experience. But if we look back at the Urshifu run, the current world record ends with more than just an XL, snagging 2 mediums and a rare candy along the way. Altogether, this would leave less than 10k experience or 1 large candy to evolve. However, even if there is one nearby, we have a bigger problem, as all but the first medium are not in fact static items, and are instead randomly selected from various pools, leaving the rare candy we would want at only a 20% rate, and far worse, the XL candy has only a 5% chance to drop, meaning speedrunners are facing 30+ minute resets to compete, leaving Rookidee without a chance. And it doesn't stop there, as even with every one of these hidden item drop rates documented, there is only one guaranteed large candy we could have gotten, and it's all the way near the top of Snowside Slope. But if we had time to make it here and go just a bit further through Tunnel to the Top and out to Path to the Peak, we would get a shot at 7 item pools with the best odds for large candies so far, all at 20%, while also holding 35% shots for mediums, giving us a shot without the XL candy at all. The problem is that by foot, we just don't have the time to make it all the way there, with my attempts ending up just a minute and a half behind the Steel Raid Den, leaving us with our definitive answer here. Except, it turns out the mayor was generous on one of my attempts, as I hit the 5% XL candy. And not only that, there is a guaranteed rare candy a few steps off our path to the guaranteed large we would need. Meaning that although we only have a 5% shot to get this run, the rest of the requirements are now accounted for, and I was able to do all of it about 30 seconds faster than the Raid Den method. So Corviknight might have gotten a kick out of watching us taxi ourselves around for once, as we showed it is in fact a solid contender for earliest steel type in the game, and the winner for our run. Although Legends Arceus gives another shot at Burmy, the cloaks can only be changed via specific locations in Hisui, and good old Trash Cloak is obtained in the coastlands or icelands, leaving us to first search for earlier options, starting with Steelix, who is the only steel type in the first area. However, it only spawns via distortions, which require us to reach the second area anyways, meaning we need to check if there are any options in the Crimson Mirelands faster than the up to 40-minute wait we would have going back to check the Fieldlands to see a distortion spawn. And thankfully there are, as the classic Sinnoh staple, the Bronzer line, are here, but only in massive mass outbreaks, along with Steelix again, which aren't unlocked until the post-game. Luckily those weren't our only options, as in the Dragon video, we went straight for Gumi by barely jumping over to the Home of Trials, which is filled with them, but also features its evolution, specifically a single level 50 Alpha Hisuian Sliggoo, now adorned with a Steel typing. And while this catch will be tricky, it's not impossible. At this point, we only have our second star, which does severely limit the number of options for making the catch, especially without being able to craft anything better than a heavy ball. In fact, we won't even have access to any higher tier balls since, from my research, boxes or chests which could contain Great and Ultra Balls aren't found in the first two areas at all. Now Ginter will give us one shot at these, but otherwise our best bet will be to use stealth sprays and food before backstriking into a battle, landing a status condition and attempting to make the catch with heavy balls before getting our team wiped. However, we do have one thing to help us out, as the slug's favorite food, plump beans, happen to be obtainable in leaf piles, and those can be found by charging up the hill near the Crimson Mireland camp. So after grabbing some, all we have to do is head south for the trial, make our river leap, use a stealth spray, and prepare for battle. While I made sure to have some Beautiflies ready for stunning, any status will give us the catch rate boost. So we will stick to Quilava's Strong Ember as it has a 50% chance to burn, does some chip damage, and continues to up our chances every turn, leading us to a catch after just a few, ending this route both with our Steel type and a massive upgrade over the Dragon Run. Finally, Scarlet and Violet features 0 new steel lines in the starting areas through South Prov 1, but the earliest to get will be the one and only Tinkatink and Ruin biomes of any further South provinces. Of course, our series has made it abundantly clear how easy hopping over to South Prov 4 is, which gives direct access to one of these locations, and since there are no other steel types prior to landing here, nor any options in this province outside of the ruins, we can head straight there. However, it's not necessarily for the Metalsmith but rather it or Bronzor, an additional steel type that spawns at these ruins. In fact, Bronzor has a 4 times higher spawn probability and the best catch rate, meaning unless we happen to reach a Tinkatink first, our ideal target is Bronzor. And luckily for us, that is exactly what happened in my run, leading to an immediate catch, finally giving Bronzor its run back and ending our challenge. So with the speed of a bullet punch, we were able to catch a steel type in every game after just 12 hours, 29 minutes, and 47 seconds, ironing itself in at 5th place. A pretty solid position for sure. Okay, that's enough with the steel jokes, but I did have a lot more fun with this one than originally thought. These challenges seem to find new ways of looking at the series, which I will always enjoy exploring. But I would love to know what you thought about this one, and the series as a whole, and thanks again to everyone who gave the last video a chance. I know it had its differences from this series, and I'm still working out how to potentially try it in the future. Additionally, since I last spoke on it, the Roses follow-up has come a long way, and I would be interested to know if there are any Pokemon fans who are also looking forward to that. Anyways, as always, thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed, and more to come soon.